Jake never thought he would need a roommate at 28. He had been living alone in his downtown apartment for 2 years, enjoying the freedom and privacy that came with working from home as a software developer. But when his longtime roommate, David, suddenly got married and moved out last spring, Jake found himself staring at a rent bill that was twice what he could comfortably afford on his own. The apartment was perfect in every other way. It sat on the 4th floor of a converted brick building, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light for his home office setup. The neighborhood was quiet but convenient, with a coffee shop downstairs and a small park across the street. Jake had grown attached to the place and really didn't want to move. After posting several ads online and meeting with a parade of potential roommates, who either seemed unreliable or just didn't click with his lifestyle, Jake was getting desperate. That's when his college friend Mike mentioned someone at the university who was looking for temporary housing. Her name is Dr. Lisa Park. Mike explained over lunch one afternoon. She's doing her PhD in marine biology, really smart, super focused on her work. She needs a place for just 6 months while they renovate the research facility where she was staying. Jake was intrigued but cautious. He had never lived with a woman before, aside from briefly sharing space with David's girlfriend before they got their own place. "What's she like?" he asked. "Honestly, you probably won't see her much." Mike laughed. "She's either buried in her books or out doing field research. She studies ocean creatures and their behaviors, spends a lot of time underwater with special diving equipment, really dedicated to her work." The description sounded ideal to Jake. He was looking for someone responsible who would help with the bills, but wouldn't interfere with his work routine or social life. When Mike arranged for them to meet at the coffee shop downstairs from Jake's apartment, Jake knew immediately that Lisa would be a good fit. She was quiet and professional, explaining that she typically worked unusual hours due to the nature of her research. She often traveled to coastal research stations and sometimes worked late into the night analyzing data. Lisa seemed more interested in discussing the practical aspects of sharing space than making small talk, which Jake appreciated. "I need a quiet environment for my research," she explained, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the rental agreement. "My work involves studying animal behavior patterns, specifically how different species respond to environmental changes. I often bring research materials home, but nothing that would disturb you." Jake was impressed by her seriousness and dedication. Lisa talked about her research with genuine passion, explaining how she was working on her doctoral thesis about mating behaviors in deep-sea creatures. She mentioned that her work could contribute to understanding climate change effects on marine ecosystems. "The research facility renovation should be complete in 6 months, Lisa added. "After that, I'll move back to the university housing. This is just temporary for me." The temporary aspect actually appealed to Jake. It meant he wouldn't have to worry about a long-term commitment if things didn't work out. But it also gave him time to save money and figure out his next steps. They agreed on a fair split of rent and utilities, and Lisa moved in the following weekend. Jake was surprised by how few belongings she had. Most of her stuff consisted of books, research equipment, and what looked like specialized diving gear. She set up a small workspace in the second bedroom, complete with a computer, microscope, and several large tanks that she said were for observing marine specimens. For the first few weeks, their arrangement worked perfectly. Lisa was exactly as Mike had described, quiet, clean, and rarely around. She would leave early in the morning with her research equipment and often didn't return until late at night. When she was home, she spent most of her time in her room or working at her desk. Jake found that he barely noticed having a roommate. Lisa was respectful of shared spaces, always cleaned up after herself, and never had visitors or played loud music. She paid her share of the bills on time and even left thoughtful notes when she used the last of something like milk or coffee. The only unusual thing Jake noticed was the schedule Lisa kept. Sometimes he would hear her moving around the apartment at very odd hours, 2 or 3 in the morning. When he asked about it casually one day, she explained that her research often required her to work around the natural schedules of the marine life she studied. Many deep-sea creatures are most active at night, she told him. To observe their natural behaviors, I have to adjust my schedule to match theirs. Sometimes that means working when the rest of the world is sleeping. Jake found her dedication impressive, even if he didn't fully understand the specifics of her work. Lisa would sometimes mention traveling to research stations along the coast for extended diving sessions, studying creatures in their natural habitat. She explained that her research involved using specialized equipment to observe and document behaviors that had never been thoroughly studied before. As the weeks turned into months, Jake grew comfortable with their routine. Lisa was the ideal roommate, responsible, quiet, and focused on her own goals. She never interfered with his work or social life, and he returned the favor by giving her the space she needed for her research. What Jake didn't realize was that Lisa's work was becoming increasingly intensive and potentially dangerous in ways that even she didn't fully understand. Lisa's research had always been demanding, but lately it was consuming her life in ways she hadn't expected. Her doctoral thesis focused on understanding how deep-sea creatures found their partners. In the vast darkness of the ocean, it was groundbreaking, work that could change how scientists understood marine life behavior. For months, she had been diving deeper and staying underwater longer than any previous researcher in her field. The university had provided her with cutting-edge equipment that allowed her to observe these mysterious creatures in their natural environment. What she was discovering was fascinating, but also completely unexpected. The creatures she studied lived thousands of feet below the surface, where sunlight never reached. In this dark world, they had developed incredible abilities to find each other across vast distances. Lisa was documenting how they used chemical signals, special scents, that traveled through the water to communicate and locate potential partners. Her research advisor, Dr. Rodriguez, had warned her about spending too much time in direct contact with these environments. We don't fully understand all the effects of prolonged exposure to these deep-sea conditions, he had told her during one of their weekly meetings. The chemical compounds these creatures produce are unlike anything we've studied before. But Lisa was driven by her passion for discovery. She felt she was on the verge of a major breakthrough that could earn her recognition in the scientific community. Each dive revealed new behaviors and patterns that no human had ever witnessed before. The diving equipment she used was specially designed for her research, unlike regular scuba gear. Her suit had sensors that could detect and analyze the chemical signals the creatures produce. This meant she was constantly surrounded by concentrated levels of these ocean compounds. During her research sessions, at first, Lisa only noticed minor effects from her extended research periods. She would feel unusually energetic after long dives and sometimes had trouble sleeping. She mentioned these symptoms to Dr. Rodriguez, who suggested she take breaks between research sessions. But Lisa was too excited about her discoveries to slow down. Her latest research site was located off the coast, about 2 hours from the university. Lisa had been making trips there 3 times a week, spending entire days underwater observing a particular species that seemed to have the most complex partner-finding behaviors she had ever seen. These creatures fascinated her because they appeared to have seasons where their drive to find partners became incredibly intense. During these periods, they would release massive amounts of chemical signals into the water, creating clouds of compounds that could affect other sea life for miles. Around. Lisa began to notice that after her research sessions with this particular species, she felt different. She would return to the apartment feeling restless and anxious, unable to focus on her normal activities. She attributed these feelings to the excitement of her discoveries and the physical demands of deep-sea diving. Jake noticed changes in Lisa's behavior too, though he didn't think much of it at first. She seemed more distracted when they passed each other in the apartment, and he could hear her moving around at all hours of the night. Sometimes she would start to say something to him, then stop mid-sentence and hurry to her room. "Everything okay with your research?" Jake asked one evening when he found Lisa staring blankly at her computer screen in the kitchen. "Oh, yes, it's going really well," she replied, but her voice sounded strained. "I'm just processing a lot." of new information. The creatures I'm studying have such complex behaviors. Sometimes I feel like I'm beginning to understand them on a level I never expected. What Lisa didn't tell Jake was that she was starting to experience physical symptoms. That worried her. After her research sessions, she felt an overwhelming restlessness that she couldn't shake. Her heart would race for hours, and she felt compelled to move constantly, as if sitting still was impossible. She tried to research these symptoms on her own, reading medical journals about the effects of deep-sea diving and chemical exposure. Most of the information she found suggested that her symptoms should fade quickly after returning to normal conditions. But for Lisa, they seemed to be getting stronger rather than weaker. Dr. Rodriguez had mentioned that other researchers working with similar species had reported unusual effects, but nothing as intense as what Lisa was experiencing. The problem was that her research was so new and specialized that there wasn't much existing data about long-term exposure to these particular ocean compounds. Lisa's research logs showed that the creatures she studied released their strongest chemical signals during what appeared to be their mating seasons. During these periods, the concentration of compounds in the water increased dramatically. Lisa had been documenting these peak periods by staying underwater for extended sessions, directly exposing herself to the highest levels of these mysterious chemicals. As her research progressed, Lisa found herself thinking about the creatures' behaviors even when she wasn't diving. She would lie awake at night, her mind racing with thoughts about their complex social patterns and the powerful drives that motivated their actions. Sometimes she felt like she could almost understand what they were experiencing. The breaking point came during her most ambitious research session yet. Lisa had discovered that the creatures exhibited their most intense behaviors during the full moon, when their chemical communications reached peak levels. She planned an overnight diving session to document this phenomenon, spending nearly 12 hours underwater surrounded by the strongest concentration of compounds she had ever encountered. When Lisa returned to shore after that session, she knew something was seriously wrong. The restless energy she had been feeling for weeks had intensified into something she could barely control. Her scientific training told her she needed medical attention, but her judgment was becoming increasingly clouded by the overwhelming sensation she was experiencing. Jake had always been a light sleeper, but the sound that woke him that night was unlike anything he had ever heard before. It was 3:17 a.m. according to his bedside clock, and someone was moving around in the apartment. At first, he thought Lisa had returned from one of her late research sessions, but something about the sound seemed different, more urgent, almost frantic. He lay in bed for a few minutes, trying to determine if he should get up and check on his roommate. Jake respected Lisa's privacy and unusual work schedule, but the noises coming from the hallway suggested something might be wrong. There was a restless energy to the movement that made him feel concerned. When Jake heard what sounded like someone pacing back and forth outside his bedroom door, he decided he needed to investigate. He quietly got out of bed and approached his door, listening carefully. He could hear Lisa's voice, but she seemed to be talking to herself in a way that sounded distressed. "This isn't normal," he heard her say repeatedly. "Something is happening to me. I need to find." Her voice trailed off, and Jake became genuinely worried. In the 3 months they had lived together, Lisa had always been calm and composed. She was the type of person who approached every situation with scientific logic and careful thinking. Hearing her sound confused and upset was completely out of character. Jake opened his door slowly and stepped into the hallway. What he saw made him freeze in shock. Lisa was standing near his doorway, and she was clearly in distress. She had removed her clothes and was wrapped in a blanket from the living room couch, but she seemed completely unaware of her state or surroundings. "Lisa," Jake said softly, trying not to startle her. "Are you okay? What's happening?" When she turned to look at him, Jake could see that her eyes were wide and unfocused. She looked like someone who was fighting against something she couldn't control. Her usual composed demeanor was completely gone, replaced by obvious confusion and distress. "Jake," she said, her voice shaking, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me." I keep thinking about biological drives and instincts. My research, the creatures I study, I feel like I'm experiencing what they experience. I need. She stopped mid-sentence and covered her face with her hands. This is going to sound crazy, but I feel like I'm having some kind of biological emergency, like my body is responding to something I can't control. Jake had no idea what to do. He had never seen anyone in this state before, and Lisa's explanation didn't make much sense to him, but he could see that she was genuinely distressed and needed help. Lisa, you're scaring me a little, Jake said gently. Can you tell me what happened? Did something occur during your research today? I spent 12 hours underwater, Lisa replied, still struggling to think clearly. The concentration of chemical compounds was higher than I've ever experienced. The creatures I study, during their mating seasons, they release these powerful signals that drive their behavior. I think my exposure to these compounds is affecting me. Jake listened carefully, trying to understand what Lisa was telling him. Her scientific background made her try to explain the situation in technical terms, but it was clear that her usual logical thinking was severely compromised. I feel like I'm being driven by the same biological imperatives that motivate the sea creatures, Lisa continued. It's like my brain is telling me I need to find a partner immediately. That is some kind of emergency. I know it sounds insane, but the feeling is so overwhelming that I can't think about anything else. The desperation in Lisa's voice made Jake realize this was far more serious than he had initially understood. She wasn't acting strangely by choice. Something was genuinely wrong with her, and she needed medical help. Okay, Lisa, I think we need to get you some help, Jake said, trying to stay calm. Do you have a contact number for your research advisor? Someone who understands your work and might know what's happening. Lisa nodded weakly and pointed toward her room. Dr. Rodriguez. His number is on my desk. He warned me about potential side effects from extended exposure, but I didn't think. Jake quickly retrieved the contact information and called Dr. Rodriguez, despite the early hour. When he explained the situation, the professor's response surprised him. I've been worried about this possibility, Dr. Rodriguez said immediately. Lisa has been pushing the boundaries of safe exposure to these marine compounds. We've seen mild reactions in other researchers, but nothing this severe. You need to get her to the University Medical Center right away. I'll call ahead and make sure the doctors who are familiar with her research are standing by. While Jake was on the phone, Lisa continued to pace around the apartment, wrapped in the blanket. She kept apologizing and trying to explain what she was experiencing, but her explanations became increasingly fragmented. The creatures I study, they have these intense drives that override everything else, she said, during their mating seasons. Nothing else matters to them except finding a partner. I feel like that's happening to me. My rational mind knows this isn't normal, but every instinct I have is telling me I need to seek out companionship immediately. Jake could see that Lisa was fighting against powerful impulses that she couldn't control. Her scientific training allowed her to recognize that something was wrong, but she seemed powerless to stop what was happening to her dot when the paramedics arrived. Lisa was initially resistant to leaving the apartment. She kept insisting that she needed to stay close to Jake, saying that his presence somehow made the overwhelming feelings more manageable. The medical team had to gently but firmly convince her that she needed specialized treatment. I'm so embarrassed, Lisa said to Jake as the paramedics prepared to transport her. I never wanted you to see me like this. I don't understand what's happening to my mind and body. Jake reassured her that she had nothing to be embarrassed about. This isn't your fault, Lisa. It sounds like your research exposed you to something dangerous. The important thing is getting you the help you need. As the ambulance pulled away, Jake stood in his apartment feeling shaken by what he had witnessed. His quiet, professional roommate had been transformed by her research into someone he barely recognized. The incident made him realize how little he understood about the risks that researchers like Lisa faced in pursuit of scientific knowledge. Jake found himself in the waiting room of the University Medical Center at 4 in the morning, feeling completely out of place. The bright fluorescent lights and sterile smell of disinfectant made everything feel surreal. He kept replaying the events of the past hour in his mind, trying to make sense of what had happened to his normally composed roommate. Dr. Rodriguez arrived about 30 minutes after the ambulance, looking concerned but not entirely surprised. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of dealing with research emergencies. When he saw Jake in the waiting area, he immediately approached him. "Thank you for calling me so quickly," Dr. Rodriguez said, shaking Jake's hand. How did Lisa seem when the paramedics took her? Confused and distressed, Jake replied honestly. She kept trying to explain what was happening in scientific terms, but she seemed like she was fighting against something she couldn't control. "Is this something you've seen before?" Dr. Rodriguez sighed and sat down next to Jake. "Not to this extent, but we've been monitoring potential side effects from Lisa's research for several months. She's been working with marine species that produce chemical compounds we don't fully understand yet. Her exposure levels have been much higher than any previous researcher in this field." The doctor explained that Lisa's research involved studying deep-sea creatures that lived in environments completely different from anything on land. These creatures had evolved over millions of years to communicate and find partners using powerful chemical signals that could travel for miles through ocean water. The problem is that these chemical compounds can affect other marine life, and apparently, they can affect humans too, Dr. Rodriguez continued. Lisa has been using specialized equipment that puts her in direct contact with concentrated levels of these substances. We thought the exposure was safe for short periods, but Lisa has been pushing the limits of what we considered reasonable. Jake learned that the university had been developing new safety protocols as they discovered more about these marine compounds. But Lisa's research was so cutting edge that they were essentially learning about the risks as they went along. Other researchers working with similar species have reported mild effects, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Some mentioned feeling unusually energetic or having trouble sleeping after research sessions. But Lisa's case is the most severe we've documented. About an hour later, Dr. Williams, the emergency physician treating Lisa, came out to speak with them. She was a specialist in toxicology who had been called in specifically because of her experience with unusual chemical exposures. Lisa is stable now, but she's experiencing what we can best describe as a chemically induced behavioral response, Dr. Williams explained. The marine compounds she's been exposed to appear to mimic certain hormones that trigger reproductive behaviors in sea creatures. Her body is essentially responding as if it's received powerful biological signals to seek out a mate. The doctor's explanation helped Jake understand why Lisa had been acting so strangely. Her rational mind knew something was wrong, but her body was being driven by artificial chemical signals that were overriding her normal thinking processes. "Is this dangerous?" Jake asked, worried about his roommate's well-being. "The good news is that we don't believe there will be any permanent effects," Dr. Williams replied. "We're treating this similar to how we would handle other types of chemical poisoning. We're using medications to help her body process and eliminate the marine compounds, and we're monitoring her vital signs closely." The treatment process was more complex than Jake had expected. The medical team had to carefully analyze Lisa's blood to determine exactly which compounds were affecting her and in what concentrations. Because this type of exposure was so rare, they were essentially creating a treatment plan specifically for her situation. Dr. Rodriguez explained that the university had been developing protocols for this exact scenario, but they had hoped never to need them. "We've been working with toxicologists and marine biologists to understand how these compounds might affect human physiology," he said. "Lisa's case will help us develop better safety measures for future researchers." Throughout the night, Jake stayed in the waiting room, feeling responsible for Lisa even though he knew the situation wasn't his fault. Dr. Rodriguez kept him updated on her progress, explaining that the treatment was working but would take time. "The chemical compounds are slowly leaving her system," the doctor told him around dawn. "As they decrease, her normal cognitive function should return." She's already starting to think more clearly than when she arrived. Jake was relieved to hear that Lisa was improving, but he was also beginning to understand the broader implications of what had happened. This wasn't just a personal medical emergency. It was a significant event in the scientific community that would likely change how research was conducted in Lisa's field. Dr. Rodriguez mentioned that the university would need to review all of their deep-sea research protocols and implement new safety measures. Lisa's dedication to her work is admirable, but this incident shows us that we need stricter limits on exposure to these marine compounds. He said. As the sun began to rise, Dr. Williams informed them that Lisa was asking to see Jake. She's much more coherent now, the doctor said. She remembers what happened and wants to apologize. I think seeing you might help her process what she experienced. When Jake entered Lisa's hospital room, he was relieved to see that she looked more like herself. She was sitting up in bed, looking tired and embarrassed, but clearly thinking rationally again. Jake, I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I can't believe I put you in that situation. I remember everything that happened, and I'm mortified by my behavior. Jake sat down in the chair next to her bed. You don't need to apologize, Lisa. You were having a medical emergency. Dr. Rodriguez explained what happened with the chemical exposure. Lisa nodded, her scientific mind already working to understand her own experience. It's fascinating from a research perspective, but terrifying to experience personally. I felt like I had no control over my own thoughts and actions. The biological drives were so overwhelming that my rational mind couldn't override them. The experience had given Lisa a unique insight into the creatures she studied, but it had also shown her the real dangers of her research methods. Lisa spent 3 days in the University Medical Center while doctors monitored her recovery and ensured all traces of the marine compounds had left her system. During this time, Jake visited her daily, and their relationship evolved from simple roommates to genuine friends who had shared an extraordinary experience. The incident had shaken both of them, but it also created a bond based on mutual understanding and respect. Jake had seen Lisa at her most vulnerable moment and responded with kindness and quick thinking. Lisa was grateful not only for his help during the crisis, but also for how he treated her afterward. Without judgment or awkwardness, I keep thinking about how you handled everything that night, Lisa told Jake during one of his visits. You could have panicked or made the situation worse, but you stayed calm and got me the help I needed. I don't know how to thank you for that. Jake appreciated her gratitude, but he was more interested in understanding how such a dedicated researcher could have ended up in such a dangerous situation. As Lisa recovered, she began to share more details about her work and the pressures she had been facing. I was so focused on making groundbreaking discoveries that I ignored the warning signs, Lisa admitted. Dr. Rodriguez had cautioned me about extended exposure, but I thought I could handle it. I was driven by the possibility of being the first person to fully document these behaviors. The competitive nature of academic research had pushed Lisa to take risks that seemed reasonable at the time, but proved to be dangerous. She had been so excited about her findings that she had gradually increased her exposure times, without fully considering the cumulative effects. When Lisa was finally discharged from the hospital, she faced some difficult decisions about her future. The university had temporarily suspended her research program while they reviewed safety protocols and developed new guidelines for working with marine compounds. I have to take a 6-month break from diving research, Lisa explained to Jake. As she packed up her equipment from the apartment, the university wants to make sure I'm completely recovered, and they need time to implement new safety measures. Jake was surprised to find that he would miss having Lisa as a roommate. Their shared experience had created a friendship he hadn't expected, and he realized how much he had enjoyed having someone around who was passionate about their work. Where will you stay during the break? Jake asked, hoping she wouldn't disappear from his life entirely. My sister lives about an hour away. I'm going to stay with her family while I work on the written portion of my thesis, Lisa replied. But I'd like to stay in touch, if that's okay with you. This whole experience has made me realize how important it is to have people in your life who you can count on. the incident had broader implications beyond just Lisa's personal recovery. The university began implementing comprehensive new safety protocols for all marine research involving chemical exposure. Lisa's case became a study that helped protect other researchers from similar experiences. Dr. Rodriguez visited Jake a few weeks after Lisa had moved out to thank him personally for his quick response. "Your actions that night probably prevented a much more serious situation," the professor told him. Lisa could have been seriously injured if she had wandered outside in her confused state. The doctor also shared that Lisa's research data, despite the dangerous circumstances under which it was collected, was contributing to important scientific discoveries. Her work will help us understand these marine ecosystems better, and the safety protocols we've developed because of her experience will protect future researchers. Jake learned that the scientific community had been watching Lisa's research with great interest. Her findings about deep-sea creature behaviors were providing new insights into how marine life might be affected by climate change and ocean pollution. Several months later, Lisa contacted Jake to let him know that she was preparing to return to her research with the new safety measures in place. She had spent her recovery time writing and had made significant progress on her thesis. "I wanted to invite you to my thesis defense when the time comes," Lisa said during a phone call. "You were part of this journey in a way I never expected, and I'd like you to be there when I present my findings." Jake was honored by the invitation and curious to learn more about the research that had led to such a dramatic experience. When the day came, he sat in the university auditorium listening to Lisa present her groundbreaking work on deep-sea creature behaviors. Her presentation was fascinating and showed how her dangerous experience had actually contributed to a deeper understanding of the creatures she studied. Lisa had gained insights into biological drives and instincts that no researcher had ever experienced firsthand. "This research has taught me that the boundary between observer and subject can sometimes become blurred in ways we don't expect," Lisa said during her presentation. "My experience, while unplanned and dangerous, provided unique insights into the powerful biological forces that drive behavior in these creatures." After her successful thesis defense, Lisa and Jake celebrated at the coffee shop where they had first met. Their friendship had grown into something neither of them had anticipated when they started as roommates. "I've been offered a position at a marine research institute on the West Coast," Lisa told Jake over coffee. "It's a dream job, but it means I'll be moving across the country." Jake was happy for Lisa's success but sad to see her go. Their shared experience had created a lasting friendship that had enriched both of their lives. "Promise me you'll be more careful with your research," Jake said with a smile. "I promise," Lisa laughed. "I've learned that some discoveries aren't worth the personal risk, but I'm excited to continue this work with proper safety measures in place." Looking back on the experience, both Jake and Lisa realized how much they had learned about themselves and each other. What started as a simple roommate arrangement had led to a friendship forged in crisis and strengthened by mutual respect and understanding. The incident also changed Jake's perspective on the dedication and risks that researchers face in pursuit of knowledge. He had gained a new appreciation for the scientific community and the personal sacrifices people make to advance human understanding of the natural world. This story became a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected experiences can lead to the most meaningful relationships and the most important discoveries.